Welcome to week 10 of Literature 328. We're now into April and the second week of Margaret Atwood's novel, The Handmaid's Tale. We have a little bit of basis for asking the question, do Gibson and Atwood represent an identifiably Canadian approach to the land, or is that too much of a stereotype? In what ways does science fiction tend to mythologize pregnancy and childbirth? Kicking back to a few of the previous novels and short stories, we can look at this issue. Film and TV versions of the novel, what do they represent? Are they more popular than the actual novel? Do people read this or just claim to have some kind of affinity for Margaret Atwood? We can also maybe look at some of her other works, some of which are science fiction. We will be working in class on watching the Children of Men movie. It's a fascinating fascinating movie set in Britain, in which nobody can conceive of children. They can't conceive children. Sorry, they don't have kids, and it's because of environmental pollution. And basically, a woman becomes pregnant, and it's a fascinating look at what that does to their world, which is full of strife and constant fighting. Anyway, sorry for mangling the discussion of Children of Men to the point where you will never want to watch it. We'll watch it in class and do a response to it, and it'll be due by the end of the week on the 12th. Great, thanks. Week 11 is an online week for Literature 328, and so we'll be meeting just virtually. We'll continue that thread of Atwood's other body of work and how the Handmaid's Tale fits in with that. Analyzing violence against the body. This has been something we've been looking at, especially since The Wind-Up Girl, and we can continue that as we end out our discussion of Atwood's novel. We'll evaluate the resolution. Remember that the climax and then the falling action resolutions, often not as satisfying of an area for people reading science fiction or any other serious fiction. So we will look at what we make of that. How does Offred act as a metaphor for the land in feminist ways? So we'll be picking up that feminist criticism from the Literary Critical PowerPoint. Remember, that's in there if you want to check that. And contrasting that with feminine or the socially expected ways. And we can kind of connect that to 2020 America. Comparing The Handmaid's Tale with The Wind-Up Girl, there should be plenty of character, theme, conflict, motivation, symbolism, points of comparison. So there's probably more similarities than differences. Also, just make sure you're doing your postings in a varied and quality way, especially as we get toward the end of the course. And we'll hit the new novel next week. Thanks. Week 12 of Literature 328 features a 420 meeting at JCC. We're going to be focusing on Dune, which will take our time for the rest of the semester. It's a longer novel, so pace your reading. I'll have mentioned that before in the weekly previews in class and in discussion posts. The topics we'll focus on this week, just exposition of any new novel, but for ours it'll be encountering Arrakis, Dune, the desert planet, what rules obtain there. So sort of the world building of any science fiction author, what are sort of the conceits and figures that the person has put into this to make it novel, different, exciting. The role of resources and economies in science fiction, we've seen it before. It's a motif that will really somewhat heavily hit here. Feudalism, at the same time, a strange combination of modern resource exploitation and then very throwback almost to the era of medieval knights and tribes and tribalism. Certainly something that's still related to us in 2020, but that's a kind of the strange combination that Frank Herbert throws at us. Factions, guilds, those sound like words from video games, but that's kind of the world we live in as well. Again, increasing tribalism, polarization, and political circumstances. So we will look at this as a relevant novel, not something from the 60s that was all for the, crystal gazing people or something. Examining the Harkonnens, the sort of antagonist faction, their sexuality, how it gets depicted, and the instrumental use toward ruling. Instrumental friends some of you may have, they use you or they use others, and We may be those people. So we'll look at these kind of paired sets of topics and start our discussion by doing some group work in class. Also read this Hari Kunzru, Dune 50 Years On, How a Science Fiction Novel Changed the World. The URL's there. It's also in Moodle. Comprehension questions. Get an early and good start on those. Complete them as you go. And look at SA3 and pick your topic. We'll see you in class.